insight development. All right, Moka. I like to walk around with my dog in the dog park and record my deep thoughts on my phone. And so I have an insight about I call it Breaking Bad, and I'll let you know what it is, and we can just chat about it. So Breaking Bad, I think when you see somebody who's like done something wrong or has just violated the norms of society or committed a crime per se, we tend to automatically just categorize them as a criminal or the other, or something so far away from ourselves. We tend not to be able to identify, but I don't think that when somebody kind of reaches their breaking point and does something they normally wouldn't do, I think any of us could do that. And the only reason we can't identify with them is because we haven't reached our breaking point yet. But it's not because there's some monster or some other type of human being. So what do you think about that?
Agreed, agreed. I mean, we understand that every individual is different, so we have to understand the different experiences or try to come to an understanding or have lenient sympathy to the experiences that individuals face and the hardships that happen. Sometimes when you hear about something, you get like an outline of the situation, but you never understand the impacts that it has on the person. You just heard about a scenario per se. And then from there, a lot of people kind of just make their own assumptions or judgments from that without taking into account the emotional wellness and the mental wellness of the individual who had that negative experience. So when that person does have that break, some people may say, well, if that happened to me, I wouldn't react that way. But I mean, and it's just like to say, if somebody shot me, I would shoot back. If somebody shot you, you'd actually fall to the floor. Most likely you're going to retract, you're going to move back. You know what I'm saying? And hold your injury and try to get aid at that point and run away from the gun. You're not going to look for a gun to shoot back, and that's like
Yeah,
almost
so
the
people
same
have
type
almost
of,
like a caricature. It's like they have a cartoonish version of what they
yeah.
think is happening and how they would react, but nobody can know until you walk a mile in a person's shoes. Like I'm sure, like how about you having kind of this? Do you wear the stain, or is your image tainted by having been in prison, or do people judge you based on that?
No, for me, my circumstances were different. The courts recognized that my case was a provocation case. So this was the individual who caused me harm intentionally, and I defended myself in it. What they were trying to say is that I was over excessive, but I was not over excessive. It's just to this point of them not understanding, when it comes to self-defense, it's not a breaking point per se, but maybe it could, maybe it is, but in a different meaning. You never know how you're going to react in a situation until you're in it. And for me, I did everything that I could to save my life and the person who attacked me, and they don't take those things into consideration.
Well, so few people are in a position like that. And so what do you say to someone who just wants to judge you about even just putting yourself into that situation in the first place?
I think they're a loser. I think people who, yeah, for real, I'll let you know. I think you're a loser. And I think that, people who feel like they have the authority to do so or feel like they have the privilege to do so need to understand that's in your head and not in reality. And, they say sticks and stones could break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Everybody is entitled to their own opinion and, interprets things into their own understanding. But my suggestion for individuals like that would be to be a little bit less stereotypical in these everyday type normatives and how you perceive different peoples in different communities and their experiences. And do not be afraid to ask questions. And when you do ask questions, do not be afraid to listen completely. Sometimes you may have a thought that um, may want to come out or an objection to a sentence of what the person is saying, but you're not listening to the whole conversation per se, or you
Yeah,
kind of you're stuck on one particular
yeah.
topic, which kind of deviates you from understanding the situation that an individual may be going through.
You know, Mocha, you said everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but I really don't believe that. I don't think people are entitled to their own opinion. I think opinions are a symptom of people's entitlement. And so
Mhm.
that's a way of turning that phrase upside down. But it's only entitled people like the Karens who are full of opinions about everybody. You know what I mean? And so if you
Mhm.
don't carry around that entitlement, you probably are more willing to be compassionate or empathetic to someone's situation.
That
All
is
right.
true.
Next insight is about indifference. And so my thought was that it actually takes a lot of emotional energy to be angry. It takes a lot of effort, actually, not as much as anger, but it takes also some effort to be happy. But to be
Mhm.
indifferent, I think, is the natural state of lazy people. I think that if you're not willing to make the effort to be happy or to be angry, the default state is indifference. And I think that most of us spend most time in this state of just not caring one way or the other. And so, do you think that indifference is kind of a plague, or is that okay to be indifferent about things?
I mean, certain situations, it's okay to be indifferent about things because sometimes you just need to gather more information in order to come to a conclusion on something or in order to choose a side. So
Yeah, yeah.
depending on
Good
what the
point.
circumstances is, indifference is okay.
Yeah.
Um, but if
My
you're
dad, my dad
too,
used to say, I don't have enough information on the topic to form an opinion. And
mhm.
I was like that statement because that's probably true for almost every time we're asked to give an opinion. It's like we don't know enough about it to form like to have a decent, credible opinion about it.
Mhm. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. I believe it's okay. What I should say is, I believe it's okay to be indifferent in an assertive stage, but if you're indifferent in a passive stage, it's just more like you're kind of you're just wanting to get by. You're just a people pleaser. You just want to make everybody happy, which leaves you to be vulnerable because everybody sees how you kind of react in that type of situation.
Yeah. You know, in debating, it often happens with the kids, they want to straddle the fence and they don't want to take a strong position one side or the other. So they try to have it both ways. And I always have to stop them and say, hey, in debating and in life, you need to take sides. You can't sit on the fence. Why? Because nothing like when you're indifferent, when you're sitting on the fence or you try to have it both ways, you're not part of the solution. And taking a side, even the unpopular side, or playing the devil's advocate, is a way of continuing the conversation, which is a
Mhm.
way of striving for a solution. So even taking the unpopular side allows us to advance the conversation. What do you think about that?
I think that's very true. I think that you have to be an assertive person in order to do such a thing. A person who remains indifferent, again, as I was saying, is a more of a passive type person where they would kind of leave the situation instead of gaining further information on the devil's advocacy side, devil advocacy side.
This picture, it reminds me of what do they call it when you know when people ignore the person suffering or in a trauma because they think someone else will take care of it. It used to be like, as animals, we have a sense of altruism. So if you see a baby or a person drowning in a lake, we jump in the lake to save them without a moment's thought to ourselves. But when you live in a big city, this natural instinct of altruism, like to be your brother's keeper or your sister's keeper, is suppressed because we just think someone else's sense of altruism is going to kick in, so I don't have to do it. And
Yeah.
so we end up a bunch of people just ignoring everybody's suffering.
I think that's an urban concept that has been being promoted, this urbanization type lifestyle. Um, I think that there needs to be, again, more humane distinction in how, in this integrated society, especially in westernized integrated societies, how, communities need to live amongst one another and care for one another. We have to remember that, we are in a country that held a trilogy of separated schools. They had a black school, a blacks only school. They had a residential school, and they had a whites only school. So this altruism wasn't really enforced in great grandparents, grandparents, or parents to this day. So let alone any type of a normalization in this altruism be projected to this new generation that's being brought. We have to think of the political landscape, past, present, and what could form in the future because of these types of political separations of communities.
Well said. Now, speaking of human